Hey, it's Tom from the Choo Choo Barn here. What we're going to work on today is I have some lighting on the Choo Choo Barn on the Dutch Wonderland area and on the zoo, and they're lit with little bulbs, and after a while the bulbs actually burn out. So what I want to do is I want to relight the bulbs using high power LEDs so that I'll never have to worry about that again. And I figured, what the heck, while I'm doing this, I'm going to show you how to do it. They're not that hard to do, just take a little bit of time. I've already done a bunch, but I got a lot more to do, so I got some work to get done. I've got things set up here pretty much. I always like to work on a block of wood. That way I don't mar my my nice table service. And I actually have another workbench, but I still like to work on a piece of wood. These are the little strip LEDs that I was talking about. They usually come in strips of 3, and they work off of 12 volts. Now I have my little 12 volt power supply over here that I built a number of years ago. It's got 12 volts DC and actually 24 volts DC. But you can use an old computer supply and for great 12 volt supply, and we'll cover that sometime. I'll show you how you do that. But this is an old power supply that I used years ago. Now what I want to do is I just want to hook up my 12 volts just to show you how bright they actually are, and they are really bright. Okay, there's a set of white ones. They actually come in cool white, and they come in warm white, which are not quite as high intensity, and they come in yellow, and they come in other colors. I have warm white ones, and I have cool white ones. I also have some yellow ones that I'm going to use. But to begin with, what you got to do first is you have to take these old fixtures apart, and they basically, practically for me, they fall apart. They've been messed around with so much. I'm going to pull that old light bulb out, and I'm going to discard that because I'm not going to need that. Then I'm going to take another one and pop the top off. I'm going to take that light bulb out of there. That light bulb was broke. Sometimes they come out real easy, sometimes they don't. And some of these actually are made of metal, and some are made of a regular old plastic. Now, once I get them apart, okay, like this one here comes in, there's 3 pieces. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tall part aside. We'll get to that later. And I'm going to set the globe aside because we don't need that at all. The only part I'm going to use is I'm going to use that very top part of the light, which is this part here. Now, I pre-drilled a piece of wood with these holes in it that actually allows my little tops to set in here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop a bunch of tops off, and I'll be back here in a second. Okay, so I got my 12 tops. They're in my little piece of wood there that I have all ready for it. And everything else is sitting here waiting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy. And I'm going to take some old scrap cardboard, Cheez-It box. Told you before, I save everything. I'm going to cut the cardboard into some half-decent sized squares. No big deal. It's all trash anyway. I don't need very many because I don't need that many applications. That's probably going to be enough. If it's not, I can cut some more. Anyway, so 5-minute epoxy takes 5 minutes to set up. That's why it's called 5-minute epoxy. It's made by DevCon. It's fantastic stuff. I use it all the time. So I'm going to take an old piece of my scrap cardboard, and I'm going to squeeze equal amounts onto my piece of scrap cardboard here. Take a big blob of it. Equal amounts, side by side. Now I don't want to get this tube top close to that, because what it is, it's a hardener and the epoxy. This is the hardener. So equal amounts are approximately that. It's not an exact science. Close is okay. Take a big toothpick, and I mix it together. Now if I want to set this up quicker, I'll take that same epoxy and I'll add a little bit of heat to it, whether I use a heat gun or if I mix this on a piece of old scrap aluminum can, and put a soldering iron next to it to get the heat to dissipate through the aluminum onto the glue. What it becomes like water, and it sets up a lot quicker. But I don't need that speed. So we're going to move some tools away from here, and I'm going to take my toothpick, fill it full of the epoxy, and drop it down in there. I'm not going to worry about it being perfect yet. It'll find its own level. And I'm going to do all 12 of these. Okay, I got all 12 of these little tops done. I got them filled with my 5-minute epoxy. 5-minute epoxy is going to set up. I'm going to leave that just sit for a little while. I'm not going to use that for a while. And some people are going to say, how do you know when it's set up? Well, I don't have a timer, but if I stick my stick on my piece of scrap cardboard, once that doesn't move, it's set up. So that's a sneaky way of finding out. But anyway, I know I'm going to spend well over 5 minutes messing with this other stuff. So we're going to throw that away. Another thing I'm going to say is I needed a piece of rag here. So went to my rag bag, of which I have a huge rag bag. I throw nothing away. If you remember correctly from me saying this in other videos, I throw nothing away. It drives my wife nuts. But I cut up old towels into nice little pieces like this. And I always have a rag in my lap because I'm constantly wiping my hands off because I got 5-minute epoxy all over my fingertips now. But anyway, what we're going to do is I have this 28 gauge wire here. It's actually called magnet wire, and it's used to actually, I guess, make magnets out of, electromagnets. But it's a very fine gauge wire, and it has a very thin film of, I guess, like a shellac on it, or a varnish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a whole bunch of these into 9-inch lengths. Okay, I'm going to measure my first one, and then I'm going to use that one to make a whole bunch of 9-inch lengths. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the insulation off of the magnet wire. Now the way I do it is probably not the same way as other people do it. But I take my little scrap of wood that I usually work on, take an X-Acto blade, and I literally scrape off the insulation from that wire until you see the nice shiny surface of the wire, rather than that off-colored covering that they put on there, that varnish. Now I'm going to do that on both ends, because the one end will get soldered onto my little LED, and the other end then will get soldered onto the resistor, and the other end then will go to the negative of my 12 volts. So I'm going to do both ends. I'm going to do 24 pieces of wire, and then we'll start soldering. One thing you got to remember in this hobby, there's a lot of mundane, repetitious work, especially on a layout the size of the Choo Choo Barn, because, you know, here I am, I'm going to try and light the whole park at Dutch Wonderland, or the whole zoo. It's going to take me at least a dozen of these little lights at the zoo, and I'm probably going to put 18 of these lights up at Dutch Wonderland, because I want it to be really lit at nighttime. The more lights at nighttime now, the better it is. It looks really great when the whole park is lit up. So I'm going to get to work here. Okay, this is my last one. That's 24 pieces of wire for 12 lights. That's 45 minutes out of my life I'll never get back. It, like I said, it just takes time. A lot of, if you're going to do something that's repetitive like this, the best thing to do is do it while you're watching television, or if you're listening to music, it makes the time go a lot faster. So I got this one, that was the last one I had to do. So now I've got 24 pieces of wire. And I'm going to do one and show you how this is all done. I'm going to take 2 pieces of wire. I have my soldering station already warmed up. And first I want to do is I'm going to clean off my tip. And if you notice, there's a piece of wire down in here. It's like a little wire. It's actually a wire Brillo pad type thing. It's called a Scrub It copper wire scrubber. Okay, and it's made for your kitchen duties. And I use this instead of a wet pad, because a lot of times these stations will come with a little sponge, and you're supposed to get them wet, and then that's what you use to clean off your tip of your soldering iron. But water reacts with metal, quite obviously, no matter what kind of metal it is, most metals. And I've read somewhere in an electronics magazine not to use the sponge pad, to go out and buy one of these copper clad type scrubbers, and that's what you use to clean off your tip with. Okay, so now I have no corrode solder paste that I use all the time as my flux. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of these wires. Well, first I'm going to take one of the LEDs, and I'm going to make sure that I've got one of the white ones, and I don't have a yellow one, because I don't want to use the yellow. I want to use the whites, and I'm going to test it first. Okay, that's a white one. Now, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to cut close enough to that LED so that it fits inside this light shade where we just put the epoxy. Now the whole idea is trim it like so. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that little resistor that's there, because we're not going to use that little black resistor right here. We're not even going to use that. We're going to cut that off. Forget about that. Now, the next thing is, take your knife again, and if you look closely, you can see that on either side of this little LED, which is that's the little high-powered LED right there, there is a brass piece of copper that comes off of here, and a piece of copper that comes off of here. Now, what I'm going to do is, on either side, I'm going to take my X-Acto knife with a rounded type blade, and I'm going to scrape all of the varnish that they coat this little piece of PC paper with. It's actually like a printed circuit board, and I'm going to scrape that off of there. And again, I got to hold this down, and I'm going to scrape. Now, I'm only going to, like I said, I'm going to do one of these. I'm not going to do all 24 of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this one done, so you can see how this is all done. Okay, this one's being hard. Okay, there we go. It's coming off. There's a lot of this varnish on here. See, I had to take that varnish off of there so I have something that I can solder my wire onto. And again, the same side, the same thing on the other side. Get that varnish off of that strip. Okay, it doesn't need a lot. You just need enough that you can solder to. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to first tin this little piece of copper that's coming off of this one side of the LED with some solder. I have my soldering station set at 4. I don't want total, a lot of heat. Okay, there's that one. Now a lot of times I'll also use something to weight, as a weight, just to weight the that LED down like that. Okay, I can use that handle, and that's enough to hold it down there for me so I can do my soldering. Okay, that is enough solder on there. Now, here's my wire, my first wire. I'm going to cut it so that I have just enough. So I've stripped it back probably, whatever that is, 3/8 of an inch or so. I only need a very small amount of that wire coming through there. Well, that bore's not hard enough. Okay, so a little solder paste. A little solder. A little weight. Now I'm going to bend this so I can get to it. And just touch the solder and it's done. That wire is hooked. Okay, now I'm going to spin this around. Add my weight so it holds it down. Take another piece of my wire, trim it, flux. And there should be just enough. There should be enough solder on your soldering tip, just enough to tin. Put a little thin coating of solder on that wire. Touch the wire to that little strip, enough to melt the solder, and it's connected. Okay, now you have a wire on either side of that LED. Now, we can test this out before we do another thing. However, if we hook 12 volts up to just that LED, it's going to blow it out. It's going to burn it up immediately, because it uses these 3 LEDs use this resistor to drop the current, not the voltage, but the current enough to allow those LEDs to work. So I know that a 510 ohm resistor will drop the current enough with 12 volts. And now we'll show it to you. Okay, I'm going to hook up one end of, I'm going to hook up the positive lead of my 12 volts to one side of the resistor. If I can get that on there. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate. Okay, there we go. That's on. Now, I'm going to hook the other end, which is the negative end, up to either one of the leads. Now, if the LED lights, that means I have the wires hooked up right. Positive to positive, negative to negative. If it does not light, obviously it's not hooked up right, which is how we're also going to find out which lead the resistor should go on, and which one's positive, which is negative. So let's take a look here. Let's see how it's going to work out. See if it's going to work. Okay, obviously that's backwards. So now I'm just going to switch this negative lead over to this side. And when I hook up there it is. Okay. There's my LED, my high-powered LED. Okay. Now, I'm not going to worry about it right now, but very shortly I'll show you I will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move these things aside for now. Bring my top over to here. I'll bring the whole plate full of tops over. I'm going to take my X-Acto knife again. Now on the back of these little strips, there's a piece, it's adhesive. There's adhesive on the back. So I'm going to peel the piece of paper off, and I am going to stick that little light up inside there. Now, prior to that, what I should have done first is I should have just knocked these corners off. It'll fit better if I could do that. It's like putting a square peg into a round hole. Okay? Now, all I do is that. Push it down. Okay. Okay, that's stuck. Bend my wires down a little bit. Feed the wires down through the hole of the globe. Put the top on. Now, one other thing I'm going to do before this all gets finished is I'm going to take a bead, a very little bit of my superjet, and run a bead of superjet around the top of this. That way everything is going to be glued together. And I'm also going to do the same thing, the globe, onto the pole. Okay, now I'm going to take these two wires and I'm going to feed them down through the pole. Now the Mike's Train House lights are keyed. That globe is actually got a little piece of plastic sticking out. So you got to kind of turn it until it falls into place. There. All of a sudden it just kind of fell in there. Alright, there's the light. The light's pretty much close to done. What I am going to do first is I am going to glue the shade on, and then we'll glue the other part, you know, the globe on and the shade. We're going to put the shade on the globe first. Like I said before, we're going to run just a very thin seal around here, just enough to allow it to hold on. Then it's not going to come off. You know, otherwise, a little bit of bumping and that thing's going to come off. So we're just a little bit of super glue, and that'll be fine there. And then I'm going to run a little glue here, just a smidge. This type of glue works better when you use a little instead of a lot. And that part's done. Now what we have to do is we have to find positive and negative again, because we have to hook the resistor onto the positive side. I always hook my resistor to the positive side of my wires. That way I know when I wire them up, my resistor is always positive. When you hook them up backwards, they're not going to work. So let's move some more stuff out of the way. I got my 12 volts here. I actually got newer connectors, so we don't have to worry about them not working anymore. Let me just take and hook up the negative to either one of these wires. Then I'm going to hook the positive to the one side of the resistor, and we're going to test it. See if I got a 50-50 chance. Nope, that's not going to work. Try the other side. Put the negative on this one, the positive on this one. Well, the positive again on the resistor. And sure enough, there it is. Okay, so I know that this side is the positive side. So I'm going to solder my resistor to that wire. First, we're going to drop a slide piece of shrink tube onto that wire. Then I'm going to cut my wire a little bit shorter. Then I am going to use my my third hand. These things come in handy, very, very handy. That's why they're called a third hand. All right, I'm going to leave everything hooked up so I don't lose which one it is. That's just going to hold that resistor until I get this all done. Cut it short, less than 1/4 of an inch. I'll cut my little piece of wire here, less than 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to make sure that all my coating is off of that wire. Bring my flux back here. Just stick the wire into the flux. A little bit of solder. Okay, we got a little solder on that. Put a little bit of solder on the resistor, just a little. Now all I'm going to do is put those two together. Like that. That's all you got to do. Now we just thread our little piece of shrink tube right up to the resistor. Get our flame. Okay, now that shrinks that tube around that joint. I have no bare wire showing anywhere here. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a little bit more here. I just like to be doubly sure. I always put a piece over top of the resistor also for some reason. It's just a little bit of added protection. All right. I still have my negative wire hooked up here. I'll bring my positive lead around. You can see the light is lit, and that's going to give a lot of down light, and it really spreads out really far. That light is done. So now I have a lot more to get done here before I take him up to the back up to the Choo Choo Barn. So what I did today, I actually took little street lamps by MTH, the exact same street lamps also available by Model Power. We normally have these at the Strasburg Train Shop by Model Power. The MTH lights, I believe, have been discontinued. The ones by Model Power are plastic. You can do exactly the same thing. They come in the round, they come in square. All you got to do is be a little more careful. You know, pop that top off of there and get the globe off and just thread everything down through. Also, you're probably saying, where do you get these little high-intensity LEDs? Well, we have these also at the Strasburg Train Shop, and you can give us a call there, and I'm going to try and get them also on on the website, which is www.etrainshop.com, both in warm white and cool white. The cool whites are going to be a little bit brighter. Warm whites, like I said, a little bit duller, have a little more yellow to them. It all depends on what you want to light up and how much you really want to light it up. I use actually some of these single ones, but like I said, you know, cutting them and everything. I actually use one of them in the little circus wagons that I have as a concession stand, you know, up at the circus, the hot dog wagon, and I just took one of them, added the wires to it, stuck it to the ceiling of the concession stand truck, and ran my wires down underneath, added the resistor, of course, and it really lit the inside of that truck really nice. So again, these are going to be available. Give the guys a call there. If you want to give them a call, it's 717-687-0464. Again, watch the website, and I'm going to try and get them on there too. So until the next time, this is Tom saying, keep on training and keep on working.